The holographic star maps flickered across the curved walls of the Grand Council chamber, while Ambassador Trellian tried to make sense of the readings displayed before him. His feathers ruffled with confusion as he studied the energy signatures coming from the vessel that had just arrived at Harmony Point Station. In his 300 years of diplomatic service, he had never seen anything quite like this. The chamber filled slowly with representatives from across the Galactic Confederation. Some arrived through physical doorways, while others materialized as holographic projections from distant worlds. All of them had received the same emergency summons. All of them had questions about the human ship. Humanity had been gone for 3,000 years. Their first contact with the Confederation had been brief and awkward. The humans had seemed aggressive and paranoid, constantly suspicious of every diplomatic gesture. Then one day they simply stopped responding to communications. Their colonies went dark. Their ships disappeared from known space routes. For 3 millennia, humanity had been a mystery that most species had simply forgotten about. Until yesterday, when the Wanderer had arrived without warning. Admiral Braun clicked his mandibles together in agitation as he reviewed the tactical data. His compound eyes processed multiple data streams simultaneously, but none of it made sense. The human vessel violated every principle of efficient spacecraft design that the Confederation had developed over millions of years. Every species in the Confederation built their ships according to the same basic mathematical principles. Sleek hulls minimized energy waste. Symmetrical designs distributed stress evenly. Centralized power systems maximized efficiency. These were not opinions or preferences. These were physical laws that governed successful space travel. The human ship looked like someone had taken 5 different vessels and welded them together without any concern for aesthetics or physics. Bulky modules jutted out at odd angles. The hull showed no symmetry whatsoever. Energy readings spiked and dropped in patterns that suggested catastrophic system failures, yet the ship operated normally. Dr. Lillian Hayes walked into the chamber with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what kind of chaos she was about to cause. She was the human ambassador, a title that hadn't existed in Confederation records for longer than most species kept historical archives. Her simple gray uniform stood out among the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other diplomats. Trellian called the session to order, his translator device rendering his chirping speech into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. He gestured toward the holographic display showing the Wanderer in perfect detail. Ambassador Hayes, the Confederation welcomes humanity's return to galactic society. However, we have serious concerns about your vessel. Our engineers believe it may be structurally unsound. For the safety of all species at Harmony Point, we must insist on a full technical inspection. Lillian smiled in a way that made Trellian's feathers stand on end. Ambassador Trellian, I appreciate your concern. However, the Wanderer has passed all of our safety certifications. We see no reason to submit to external inspection at this time. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. A Confederation member refusing a safety inspection was virtually unheard of. The whole system of galactic cooperation depended on shared standards and mutual trust. Admiral Braun stood, his chitinous armor gleaming under the chamber lights. Ambassador Hayes, your vessel's energy signature suggests imminent reactor failure. Our military protocols require that we escort it away from populated stations until the problem can be resolved. There is no problem, Admiral. What you're reading as failures are actually our standard operating parameters. Human ships are designed differently than yours. Designed differently, Trellian's crest feathers flared. Ambassador, there are physical laws that govern spacecraft construction. Energy efficiency, structural integrity, symmetrical mass distribution. These are not matters of culture or preference. They are requirements for survival in space. Lillian walked to the center of the chamber where the hologram of the Wanderer rotated slowly. She reached out and expanded the image, highlighting various sections of the ship. You're absolutely right, Ambassador. Physical laws do govern space travel, but there are many ways to work within those laws. Your species have chosen to optimize for efficiency and predictability. We chose to optimize for adaptability and resilience. A young analyst named Pip, whose amphibious species had only recently achieved space travel, leaned forward with interest. What do you mean by adaptability? I mean that your ships are beautiful solutions to known problems. They're fast, efficient, and elegant, but they assume you know what problems you're going to face. Lillian gestured at the Wanderer again. Our ship is designed assuming we don't know what we'll encounter. Every system has multiple backups using different technologies. Every section can operate independently if needed. We sacrifice efficiency for versatility because we learned that survival in unknown space requires flexibility, not perfection. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued that human ships posed a safety risk. Others wondered if humanity had discovered something during their isolation that the Confederation had missed. The military faction worried about weapons implications, while scientists demanded immediate collaboration. Through it all, Lillian stood calmly at the center, waiting for the chaos to subside. Captain Reed Walsh watched the council proceedings from the bridge of the Wanderer. His ship was currently docked at the outer ring of Harmony Point, far from the main habitation areas as the Nervous Station authorities had requested. He didn't mind. It gave him time to run system checks and prepare for what he knew was coming. The communication panel chimed. Lillian's face appeared on the screen. They're terrified of us, Reed. They think we're either going to explode or start shooting. Reed grinned. So same as first contact then. Pretty much, but I think we can convince them. There's a mining colony about 6 light years from here that's been having pirate problems. If we could demonstrate our capabilities in a practical situation. You want me to volunteer us for combat duty before they've even agreed we're safe to be here. I want you to show them why we build ships like this. They need to understand that different doesn't mean dangerous. Reed looked around his bridge. Unlike the streamlined, efficient command centers of Confederation vessels, his bridge felt more like a workshop. Tools hung on magnetic strips. Backup consoles lined every wall. His crew of 15 could each operate from multiple stations depending on what the situation required. All right, send the request. But when they start asking questions about how we do what we do, remember that we're not ready to share everything yet. Lillian nodded. 3,000 years wasn't enough time to forget why we left. We'll share what we can when we're sure they'll use it wisely. The transmission ended just as the emergency alert came through. Pirates attacking mining colony. Confederation fleet 3 days away. The Wanderer was the only ship in range. Reed didn't wait for permission. He was already plotting the jump coordinates before the official request for help came through. The mining colony of Refuge 7 never had much protection. Located on the edge of Confederation space, it existed primarily to extract rare minerals from the asteroid field surrounding a dying red dwarf star. 300 miners lived there, mostly from species that preferred low gravity and dim light. They had always relied on the assumption that pirates wouldn't bother with such a remote target. They had been wrong. 5 pirate vessels circled the colony like predators, their weapons already having disabled the mining station's basic shields. The colony's distress beacon broadcast desperately into space, knowing that help was days away. Then something impossible appeared on their sensors. The Wanderer emerged from its jump barely 10,000 kilometers from the colony, a distance that should have required hours of careful calculation and preparation. Standard jump protocols demanded extensive gravitational mapping and multiple safety checks before any vessel could safely transition from faster-than-light travel. The human ship had apparently decided those rules were optional. Back at Harmony Point, the observation deck had filled with curious observers. Trellian stood at the central viewing port, his translator device working overtime as dozens of species debated what they were witnessing. The Confederation had transmitted live feeds of the crisis to the council chamber, expecting to watch either a human rescue attempt or a spectacular failure. Admiral Braun studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The pirates were using a standard harassment formation, designed to keep a target pinned while they extracted valuables. It was predictable, efficient, and had worked successfully for centuries. The Wanderer should have been an easy target. It was alone, outnumbered, and its strange design suggested it would be slow to respond. Instead, the human ship accelerated directly toward the pirate formation at a speed that made several observers gasp. Conventional wisdom said that a ship entering combat should maintain defensive distance while assessing threats. The humans apparently preferred a more direct approach. The pirate leader, a veteran raider from a species called the Hask, initially laughed when he saw the approaching vessel. His translator broadcast his amusement to his crew. "Look at that ugly thing. Probably some cargo hauler trying to play hero. Target their engines and let's add another prize to today's collection." 3 pirate ships broke formation and moved to intercept the Wanderer, their weapons charged, preparing to disable what they assumed was an easy target. Then the human ship did something that made every military analyst in the Confederation question their understanding of spacecraft engineering. It separated into 3 distinct vessels. Not explosively, not catastrophically, but smoothly and deliberately. What had been one ungainly ship became 3 smaller craft, each moving independently yet maintaining perfect coordination. The sections that had looked like random bulky modules were actually self-contained ships that had been traveling together. Pip nearly fell out of his observation seat. That's not possible. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical, and the structural stress of separation during active flight should tear them apart. But the 3 human vessels were very much intact and very much dangerous. The lead pirate ship fired its weapons at what had been the central hull of the Wanderer. The energy beam struck true, scoring direct hits that should have disabled the vessel's main systems. Instead, the targeted section simply redistributed power from undamaged systems and continued fighting. Its armor plating, which had looked haphazard and poorly designed, proved to be layered in ways that dissipated weapon impacts. The 2 flanking sections of the Wanderer moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for ships of their mass. They came at the pirate vessels from angles the raiders hadn't anticipated, their weapons systems activating from locations that hadn't been visible during initial scans. But what shocked the observers most was that the human ships weren't trying to destroy the pirates. Magnetic grappling systems extended from the human vessels, latching onto the pirate ships with enough force to disable their engines, but not enough to cause critical damage. When pirates tried to fire their weapons, precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses shut down their weapon systems without destroying them. Captain Walsh's voice came through the communication channels, calm and professional. "Pirate vessels, this is Captain Reed Walsh of the Confederation vessel Wanderer. You are now secured. Your crews are unharmed. Please prepare to be escorted to the nearest Confederation security facility." The Hask pirate leader snarled into his communication system. "What kind of military doesn't shoot to kill? You're making a mistake, human. We'll remember this weakness." Reed's response was quiet but firm. "We don't consider restraint a weakness. We consider it proof that we have better options than you do." The 2 remaining pirate ships that hadn't engaged tried to flee, but the 3 sections of the Wanderer were faster and more maneuverable than their bulky appearance had suggested. Within minutes, all 5 pirate vessels were secured and helpless. The mining colony's administrator, a crystalline being named Quartz, sent a trembling message of gratitude. "Human ship, You saved 300 lives today. We have no way to repay you." "No payment needed," Reed responded. "Just doing what anyone should do when neighbors need help." Back at the observation deck, silence had fallen across the assembled representatives. They had just watched a single human vessel defeat 5 pirate ships without firing a single destructive shot. More impressively, they had watched that single vessel prove to be 3 ships working in perfect coordination. Admiral Braun's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his species. They designed their ship to break apart in combat. They planned to be outnumbered. They assumed they would take damage and built accordingly. This isn't just different engineering. This is a completely different philosophy of warfare. Trellion's feathers had smoothed down, his initial alarm replaced by something closer to awe. They didn't optimize for winning quickly. They optimized for winning without unnecessary destruction. Even against enemies, they chose the harder path that preserved life. Lillian Hayes stood quietly at the back of the observation deck, watching the council members process what they had witnessed. She knew that demonstrations spoke louder than explanations ever could. Pip swam closer to her observation position, his large eyes reflecting curiosity. "Ambassador Hayes, how many other surprises do your ships contain?" Lillian smiled. "Would you like to come aboard and find out? Captain Walsh has offered to allow an inspection team to tour the Wanderer. I think you'll find it quite educational." As the 3 sections of the human ship smoothly recombined into a single vessel, the assembled representatives realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and they had brought ideas that challenged everything the Confederation thought it knew about survival in space. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready to learn. The inspection team consisted of 12 representatives from different species, each chosen for their expertise in spacecraft engineering, military tactics, or xenological studies. They gathered at the docking port with varying degrees of enthusiasm and apprehension. Some were eager to explore human technology. Others came only because their governments had ordered them to gather intelligence. Pip was among the eager ones, his amphibious body practically vibrating with excitement as the airlock cycled open. The first thing that struck the inspection team was the smell. Not unpleasant, but distinctly organic. Most Confederation ships smelled of recycled air, sterilization chemicals, and ozone from electronic systems. The Wanderer smelled like growing things. A human crew member named Diana Chen greeted them at the airlock. She wore a practical jumpsuit covered in pockets and tool loops, and her easy smile put the more nervous visitors at ease. "Welcome aboard. I'm Chief Engineer Chen. Captain Walsh asked me to show you around. Please feel free to ask questions about anything you see." She led them down a corridor that curved in ways that made Admiral Braun's spatial perception struggle. Confederation ships had straight corridors or precisely calculated curves that optimized foot traffic. This corridor seemed to wind almost randomly, though closer inspection revealed that it provided access to multiple different sections from various angles. "Why is nothing straight?" asked a reptilian engineer named Solas, his scaled head tilting in confusion. Diana ran her hand along the curved wall. "Straight lines are efficient if everything goes according to plan. Curved paths give you options when plans fail. This corridor can be sealed at 16 different points. If one section loses pressure, the curve prevents rapid decompression from affecting the entire ship. Plus, attackers can't shoot straight down it if they board us." "You designed your ship assuming you'd be boarded." Admiral Braun's voice carried obvious disbelief. "We designed our ship assuming everything that could go wrong eventually would go wrong. Sometimes that means environmental failure. Sometimes it means hostile boarding. Sometimes it means things we haven't even thought of yet." The inspection team entered what Diana called the primary engineering bay, though she mentioned there were 3 secondary bays distributed throughout the ship. The The space was larger than expected, filled with equipment that ranged from highly advanced to surprisingly primitive. Pip noticed a section of the bay that appeared to be a complete mechanical workshop, with tools for manual fabrication. You have a machine shop inside your ship. Of course, if something breaks and we're weeks from the nearest station, we need to be able to make replacement parts. We carry raw materials and the equipment to process them. It makes us heavier and less efficient, but it means we're self-sufficient. A feline engineer named Sasha examined one of the power cores with fascination. Your energy distribution is incredibly wasteful. You're producing 3 times as much power as you could possibly need, and then bleeding off the excess into secondary systems. Diana nodded enthusiastically. Exactly right. We call it redundant capacity. Those secondary systems include backup life support, emergency propulsion, additional computational power, and manufacturing energy. If our primary systems fail, we don't slowly lose capability. We just switch to different systems that are already running. But the inefficiency, Sasha protested. The fuel costs alone must be enormous. They are, but running out of fuel is an inconvenience. Running out of options is deadly. We chose to prioritize survival over economy. The tour continued through sections that challenged everything the visitors knew about ship design. They saw a medical bay equipped to treat 70 different species' physiologies, even though the Wanderer's crew was entirely human. They walked through cargo holds that could be rapidly converted into emergency habitation, agricultural facilities, or additional workshop space. The hydroponics section particularly impressed the team. Rows of growing plants stretched across an entire deck, producing fresh food and oxygen while recycling wastewater. Most ships used chemical processors for life support, which were more compact and predictable. Plants can die, Trellian observed, his feathers ruffling with concern. If your crop fails, your life support fails. Diana knelt beside a row of leafy vegetables, checking their growth. Plants can die. That's why we have chemical backup systems too. But plants do more than just produce oxygen. They provide fresh food, which is important for morale on long voyages. They process waste in ways that chemical systems can't match. And they create a connection to Earth that matters to us psychologically. You're willing to accept less efficient systems for psychological reasons. Solas seemed genuinely puzzled. Happy crew members make better decisions in crisis situations. Depression and isolation are as dangerous as hull breaches in deep space. We learned that lesson the hard way during our isolation. Admiral Braun had been quiet during most of the tour, but he spoke up as they entered the ship's bridge. Unlike the centralized command centers of Confederation vessels, the Wanderer's bridge looked more like a collaborative workspace. Multiple stations could access the same controls. Information displays could be reconfigured based on current needs. Your bridge has no single command position. How do you maintain clear authority during combat? Captain Walsh looked up from a navigation console where he had been reviewing star charts with 2 other crew members. Authority comes from expertise and trust, Admiral, not from sitting in a special chair. During combat, whoever has the best information and training for the current situation makes the call. Sometimes that's me. Sometimes it's my weapons officer or my navigator or my engineer. We train everyone to think independently and work together. This concept seemed to disturb several of the military representatives. Confederation doctrine emphasized clear chains of command and specialized roles. The idea of fluid authority based on situation rather than rank was almost revolutionary. Pip had been taking notes throughout the tour, his webbed hands moving rapidly across a data pad. Ambassador Hayes mentioned you optimized for unknown problems, but how can you prepare for things you haven't imagined? Diana smiled at the young analyst. You can't prepare for specific unknown problems, but you can prepare for general categories of failure. Systems break, so we build redundancy. People get hurt, so we build comprehensive medical. We might get stranded, so we build manufacturing. We might need to communicate with unknown species, so we carry libraries and translation matrices. We learned that flexibility is its own form of preparation. The tour concluded in a common area where crew members were playing a strategy game that seemed to involve physical pieces and complex rules. Off-duty Confederation crew typically spent time in private quarters or dedicated recreation facilities. The humans seemed to prefer communal spaces. As the inspection team prepared to leave, Trellian asked the question that had been bothering him throughout the tour. Captain Walsh, why did humanity isolate itself for 3,000 years? What happened during first contact that made you disappear? Reed was quiet for a moment before answering. We were young and scared, Ambassador. We saw the Confederation's efficiency and standardization and thought it meant you would force us to conform. We saw your military power and thought it meant you would conquer us. So we ran away and hid until we could defend ourselves. And now we're still scared. But we learned during our isolation that being scared doesn't mean being alone. We're hopping. The Confederation has learned some things too. Long-range sensors detected the anomaly 3 hours after the inspection team had returned to Harmony Point. The initial readings suggested a large vessel approaching from deep space, moving on a trajectory that would bring it directly to the station within 2 days. That alone was unusual. Most traffic arrived through established jump points, following routes that had been mapped and verified over thousands of years. This vessel was coming from a region of space that had no recorded settlements or stations. It was emerging from the void. Lieutenant Kira Santos sat at her sensor station aboard the Wanderer, frowning at the data streaming across her screens. She had been monitoring local space as part of standard protocol, but this contact made her instincts twitch. Something about it felt wrong. Captain, I'm picking up something odd. Large vessel, unknown configuration approaching from bearing 273. It's big, sir. Bigger than anything in the Confederation database. Reed moved to stand behind her station, studying the readings. How big? At least 3 times the size of a Confederation battleship. Maybe more. The readings are fluctuating in ways I've never seen. It's like the ship is phasing in and out of normal space. Origin. Unknown. That region of space has been unmapped for as long as we have records. There's nothing out there. No stars, no colonies, nothing. Reed pulled up the communication channel to Harmony Point. Station control, this is the Wanderer. We're tracking a large, unknown vessel approaching your position. Recommend you alert the Confederation fleet. The response came back quickly, tinged with nervousness. Wanderer, we have the contact. The Council is being notified. Stand by for instructions. At the Grand Council chamber, emergency protocols activated for the second time in as many days. Trellian found himself once again studying holographic displays that made no sense. The approaching vessel's energy signature was unlike anything in the database. Its hull configuration defied standard classifications. Even its method of propulsion seemed to operate on principles that Confederation science couldn't explain. Admiral Braun immediately ordered all available military vessels to defensive positions around the station. 6 Confederation ships moved into formation, their shields activating and weapons systems charging. It was a standard defensive posture, proven effective against known threats over millions of years of conflict and piracy. The unknown vessel continued its approach, apparently unconcerned by the military response. Harmony Point attempted communication on every known frequency and protocol. Mathematical sequences, musical patterns, visual representations of atomic structures. Everything that had worked in the past to establish first contact with new species. The unknown vessel acknowledged none of it. As the vessel grew closer, its size became more apparent. It was massive, easily 10 times larger than the Confederation's biggest warship. Its hull showed signs of extreme age, pitted and scarred by countless impacts over what must have been millennia. Yet its systems still functioned. Its engines still moved it through space with purpose. Trellion's feathers stood on end as he realized what they might be facing. It's ancient, older than any active vessel in the Confederation. If it's automated, its programming might predate current communication protocols by tens of thousands of years. The military ships maintained their defensive formation, but Admiral Braun knew that if this vessel was hostile, they had very little chance of stopping it. The sheer mass advantage would overwhelm them. He was preparing orders for civilian evacuation when the Wanderer did something unexpected. The human ship left the safety of the station perimeter and accelerated toward the unknown vessel. "What are they doing?" Braun's mandibles clicked in agitation. "That's not defensive protocol. They're approaching the potential threat alone." But the Wanderer wasn't attacking. Instead, it began broadcasting on hundreds of different frequencies simultaneously. The transmissions included everything the Confederation had tried, plus dozens of additional methods. Mathematical progressions, yes, but also chemical formulas, biological sequences, gravitational wave patterns, and even simple counting in multiple bases. More surprisingly, the Wanderer was broadcasting music. Not just mathematical patterns disguised as music, but actual artistic compositions from dozens of different cultures. Human orchestras, whale songs, wind chimes, percussion ensembles. The ship was throwing every form of communication it could produce into space, hoping something would resonate. Pip watched from the observation deck, his analytical mind racing. They're not assuming the vessel uses any one form of communication. They're trying everything at once. It's incredibly inefficient, but if they don't know what will work, trying everything maximizes their chances. Diana Chen was at the Wanderer's communication station, her hands moving across multiple control panels. She was coordinating transmissions that ranged from radio waves to quantum entanglement pulses. It was exhausting work, but she had trained for exactly this kind of scenario. "Captain, I'm getting something. Not a response, exactly. But the vessel's scanning beam intensity decreased when I transmitted the musical sequences. It might be responding to patterns rather than literal meaning." Reed nodded. "Keep transmitting the patterns. Add variations. Show that we're deliberately creating complex sequences, not just making noise." Aboard 3 other human vessels that had quietly arrived in the system over the past day, similar communication attempts were underway. Each ship had slightly different transmission capabilities, and together they created a web of signals that surrounded the unknown vessel. The ancient ship slowed its approach. Its scanning beams, which had been methodically analyzing Harmony Point's defenses, redirected toward the human vessels. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then the unknown vessel began broadcasting its own patterns. The transmission was unlike anything the Confederation had ever recorded. It used gravitational fluctuations as a carrier wave, with information encoded in the minute variations of local spacetime. It was a method of communication that required enormous energy and precision, suggesting a civilization that had mastered physics in ways current science hadn't achieved. Diana's translation algorithms went to work, attempting to decode the message. What emerged was fragmentary and strange, but comprehensible. Probe Unit 774. Mission parameters. Locate surviving populations. Civilization primary ceased function approximately 47,000 years ago. This unit continues survey protocol until mission completion or catastrophic failure. The ancient vessel wasn't a ship. It was an automated probe sent by a civilization that had collapsed before humans had even left Earth. It had been drifting through space for longer than recorded galactic history, following programming that had long since become obsolete. And it was dying. The probe's power systems were failing after tens of thousands of years of operation. Its databases were corrupted from countless high-energy particle impacts. It didn't recognize current civilization markers because those markers hadn't existed when it was launched. The Confederation's standard defensive formation had triggered its threat assessment protocols, nearly causing it to defend itself against what it perceived as hostile primitives. Only the humans' non-standard approach had confused its threat assessment enough to pause its automated response. The Confederation's top engineers gathered in a virtual conference, their holographic forms flickering as they debated the probe situation. The ancient vessel's power core was critical. If it failed catastrophically, the resulting explosion would destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers. That included Harmony Point Station and its 70,000 residents. "We need 3 days minimum to fabricate specialized containment equipment," declared Solas, his reptilian features grim. "The probe's power signature is unlike anything we currently use. Standard salvage procedures won't work. We'd need to design entirely new interfaces from scratch." Admiral Braun studied the tactical projections. "We don't have 3 days. The probe systems are degrading faster than our models predicted. We have maybe 36 hours before catastrophic failure becomes inevitable. We need to start evacuation protocols." Trellion's feathers drooped with disappointment. The probe potentially contained knowledge from a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel 47,000 years ago. Its databases might hold scientific discoveries that could advance every species in the Confederation by centuries. But safety had to come first. He was about to order the evacuation when Diana's voice came through the communication channel. "Council, this is Chief Engineer Chen aboard the Wanderer. We can interface with the probe. Request permission to attempt salvage." The virtual conference fell silent. Several engineers began speaking at once, their objections overlapping into incomprehensible noise. Solas spoke loudest. "Chief Chen, with all respect to human capabilities, you've had less than an hour to study the probe. Our best engineers need 3 days. How could you possibly be ready to attempt contact?" Diana's response was calm and matter-of-fact. "Because we're not trying to understand the probe systems. We're trying to interface with them. There's a difference. The Wanderer carries 47 different types of power connectors, 16 different data interface systems, and equipment to fabricate custom connections for unknown technologies. We designed our ship to work with things we've never seen before." "That's impossible," another engineer protested. "You can't design interfaces for unknown systems. The variables are infinite." "You're right. We can't design for every specific unknown, but we can design for general categories of unknowns. Power transfer is power transfer, regardless of the specific technology. Data transmission follows certain principles even if the encoding is unfamiliar. We built our systems to be adaptable rather than optimized." Captain Walsh appeared on the communication channel alongside Diana. "Council, we'd like permission to attempt the salvage. If we fail, we'll have enough warning to retreat before the probe detonates. If we succeed, we preserve whatever knowledge the probe contains." Admiral Braun's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Captain Walsh, I watched you defeat 5 pirate ships through unorthodox tactics, but this is different. This is ancient technology from an unknown civilization. One mistake could cost thousands of lives." "Admiral, during our 3,000 years alone, we found 17 ancient derelicts in uncharted space. 4 of them had active power systems despite being thousands of years old. We've had practice with this exact scenario. Please, trust us." The council voted quickly. Trellian gave the authorization with heavy reluctance. If the humans failed, evacuation would become impossible. They were betting thousands of lives on humanity's unusual approach to engineering. The Wanderer began its approach to the ancient probe with careful precision. Unlike the Confederation's sleek vessels, The human ship carried external equipment pods that could be rapidly reconfigured for different tasks. Diana and her team had spent the last hour assembling what looked like a haphazard collection of cables, magnetic clamps, and mysterious devices. "It's beautiful in its own way," Pip observed from his monitoring station. "They're not trying to match the probe's technology. They're building a bridge between unknown systems using universal physical principles." The Wanderer extended its salvage equipment toward the probe's hull. Unlike standard docking procedures that required precise alignment and compatible connection ports, the human equipment simply attached wherever it could find purchase. Magnetic clamps secured to the ancient metal. Flexible cables snaked across the surface, seeking any port or panel that might provide access. Diana worked at her engineering station, coordinating a team of 20 technicians. Each one monitored different aspects of the connection attempt. Unlike Confederation ships where specialists handled specific systems, every member of Diana's team had trained in multiple disciplines. They could switch roles instantly as the situation demanded. "I've got a power connection," reported a technician named Marcus Webb. "The probe's energy is conducting through our adaptive couplers. It's crude, but it's working." "Data port located," called another technician. "The encoding is completely alien, but we're getting signal transmission, initiating universal translation protocols." The process was not elegant. The Confederation engineers watching from Harmony Point were horrified by the seemingly random nature of the connection attempts. The humans were literally trying everything, accepting failures as learning opportunities rather than disasters. But it was working. Power began flowing from the Wanderer into specialized containment systems. The energy wasn't being stored efficiently, but it was being stored safely. The probe's critical power buildup began to decrease as the human ship literally drained its excess capacity. The data connection proved more challenging. The probe's information was encoded using principles that predated current digital technology by tens of thousands of years. It wasn't binary. It wasn't quantum. It used gravitational state variations that required enormous precision to read. Diana stared at her screens, watching patterns that made no sense to conventional analysis programs. Then she had an idea that would have seemed ridiculous to Confederation engineers. "Stop trying to translate it. Just record it exactly as transmitted. We'll figure out the meaning later. Right now, we just need to preserve the data before the probe's memory banks fail completely." The Wanderer's systems began recording raw gravitational fluctuations without attempting interpretation. Terabytes of incomprehensible data flooded into the ship's storage systems. It would take years to decode, possibly decades, but at least it would survive. Over the next 12 hours, the human crew performed what could only be described as emergency surgery on a patient they didn't understand using tools they had improvised. They stabilized power systems without knowing how those systems worked. They extracted data without knowing what that data meant. They kept the ancient probe alive through sheer determination and adaptability. When the probe finally stabilized, its power levels safe, and its data successfully transferred, the Wanderer had been connected to it through hundreds of cables and connectors. It looked like technological chaos, a mess of improvised solutions that violated every principle of elegant engineering. But those messy, inelegant, improvised solutions had just saved thousands of lives and preserved knowledge from a civilization that had died before recorded history began. The Grand Council chamber had changed over the week following the probe incident. Representatives who had initially viewed humanity with suspicion now studied the data streams from the ancient vessel with fascination. The probe's partially decoded information had revealed survey data from galactic regions that the Confederation had never fully explored. There were hints of other ancient automated systems, potentially dozens of them, scattered throughout unmapped space. Some of those systems might be dangerous. Others might contain knowledge worth preserving. All of them would require the kind of adaptable approach that humanity had demonstrated. Trellian called the assembly to order, his feathers now smooth with calm rather than ruffled with anxiety. The vote they were about to take would fundamentally change the Confederation's approach to exploration and first contact. The proposal before us is simple in concept but profound in implication. We invite humanity to join the Confederation as full members, and we establish a joint exploration initiative to investigate the ancient sites identified in the probe data. This initiative will combine Confederation efficiency with human adaptability, creating new protocols for encountering unknown situations. The debate that followed was surprisingly brief. Most species had already made their decisions after watching the humans save both the probe and the station. Even the military faction, initially concerned about human ships as potential threats, now saw them as valuable assets for dealing with unconventional challenges. The vote passed with overwhelming support. Admiral Braun stood to address the assembly, his chitinous armor gleaming under the chamber lights. I spent 40 years studying military doctrine. I believed that optimal efficiency and standardized tactics were the foundation of successful defense. The humans have taught me that I was both right and wrong. Efficiency is crucial when you understand the threat. Adaptability is crucial when you don't. The galaxy needs both approaches. Pip had been invited to speak as the youngest analyst to recognize the value of human methods. His amphibious body trembled slightly with nervousness as he addressed representatives from 847 different species. I've been studying human ship design in detail over the past week. What I've learned is that they don't actually build ships. They build possibilities. Every human vessel is really a collection of tools waiting to be used in ways the designers haven't imagined yet. They prepare for unknown problems by creating unknown solutions. It's brilliant and terrifying and exactly what we need. Dr. Lillian Hayes stood when invited to speak on behalf of humanity. She looked around the chamber at species from across the galaxy, remembering the last time humans had faced this assembly 3,000 years ago. When we first encountered the Confederation, we were young and afraid. We saw your unity and thought it meant conformity. We saw your military strength and thought it meant oppression. We ran away because we didn't understand the difference between cooperation and control. She paused, letting her words settle. During our isolation, we faced challenges alone. We encountered the unknown without support or guidance. We made mistakes that cost lives. We learned lessons the hard way, through trial and error and sometimes through tragedy. And eventually, we realized that being different doesn't mean being alone. Our ships reflect what we learned during those 3,000 years. We built them for a universe we didn't understand, preparing for problems we couldn't predict. Now we're back, and we're offering to share what we learned. Not because we think our way is better than yours, but because we think different approaches make everyone stronger. Captain Reed Walsh appeared via holographic projection, standing on the bridge of the Wanderer where he was preparing for the first joint exploration mission. The joint initiative launches tomorrow. We'll be exploring the nearest ancient site identified in the probe data. Our crew includes members from 16 different Confederation species, all working together using combined protocols. He gestured to the people around him. Diana Chen stood at the engineering station beside a crystalline engineer from Quartz's species. Marcus Webb coordinated with a reptilian navigator. Human and Confederation crew members worked side by side, learning from each other. This is what cooperation looks like. Not everyone doing things the same way, but everyone doing things together. The Confederation brings knowledge and experience. Humanity brings adaptability and redundancy. Together, we can handle whatever we find out there. The first joint vessel was ready to launch from Harmony Point's construction bays. It was a strange hybrid of design philosophies. The core structure followed Confederation principles of efficiency and elegance, but throughout the ship, Human-inspired redundancy and adaptability had been woven into the systems. It had backup systems for the backup systems. It had workshops and fabrication facilities. It had flexible spaces that could be reconfigured for unknown purposes. The ship had been named through a vote of all member species. After thousands of suggestions, one name had emerged with overwhelming support: Horizon. It represented both species looking forward together, preparing to cross into unknown space with combined strengths. Trellian watched the Horizon's launch from the observation deck, standing beside both Lillian and Pip. The young analyst had accepted a position as chief science officer aboard the vessel, eager to continue learning human methods while contributing Confederation knowledge. "I was wrong to fear your ships," Trellian admitted quietly. "I saw chaos where I should have seen preparation. I saw waste where I should have seen insurance against disaster. Your vessels are exactly what they need to be, even if they make my aesthetic sensibilities uncomfortable." Lillian smiled. "Your ships are beautiful, Ambassador, elegant solutions to known problems. We just got used to dealing with unknown problems. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different tools for different situations." The Horizon accelerated away from the station, its hybrid drive systems functioning smoothly. Behind it, 3 Confederation vessels and 2 human ships followed in formation. Each maintained their own distinct design philosophy, but they moved together with shared purpose. 5 years later, the Joint Exploration Initiative had discovered 41 ancient sites scattered across previously unexplored regions. Some contained automated systems like the original probe. Others held ruins of civilizations that had risen and fallen before current galactic society emerged. A few presented dangers that required careful handling. The combined Confederation and human approach proved ideal for these challenges. When situations were predictable, Confederation efficiency handled them quickly. When situations were novel, human adaptability found solutions. The two philosophies complemented each other perfectly. New ship designs emerged from collaborative research. They maintained Confederation elegance while incorporating human redundancy. They optimized for efficiency while preparing for flexibility. They represented the best of both approaches. The galaxy was changing, slowly but inevitably. Species that had built identical ships for millions of years began experimenting with variations. The human philosophy of preparing for unknown problems spread through Confederation space, not replacing existing methods but augmenting them. Humanity had returned from 3,000 years of isolation, bearing gifts of knowledge earned through hardship. The Confederation had accepted those gifts and offered their own knowledge in return. Together, they looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever mysteries the galaxy held. Because now they understood what humans had learned during their time alone. The universe was vast and strange and full of surprises. The only way to face it successfully was together, with every tool available, prepared for problems that nobody had imagined yet.